Deep in the forest, a solid black wooden gate, as tall and imposing as a fortress wall, rose before the old veteran. Beside him, his
What do you
gray
think,
and white
boy?
German
Is
shepherd
this gonna
let out
work?
a low growl, its eyes fixed on the strange slot where Cole had just inserted his only dollar. As the massive gate began to move without a sound, neither of them knew they were unlocking a forgotten world, a valley filled with secrets, and a destiny that was waiting for them. Please support us by subscribing to the channel. Where in the world are you listening to this story from? The roar of the rotors was the first thing to break through the silence, a phantom sound that clawed its way from memory into the damp Oregon morning. Cole's eyes snapped open. For a heart-stopping second, he wasn't in his small rental cabin on the edge of the Siuslaw National Forest. He was back in the dust and the heat, the air thick with sand and the metallic taste of fear. His breath hitched, his knuckles white where he gripped the thin blanket. Then, a wet nose pressed firmly against his hand. A low, soft whine followed, a sound of deep concern. Cole turned his head, and his gaze met the intelligent amber eyes of Kodiak. The German shepherd, a magnificent 5-year-old with a striking coat of gray and white, had his heavy head resting on the edge of the bed. He didn't bark or panic. He simply watched, his presence a solid, calming anchor in the turbulent sea of Cole's thoughts. "Easy, boy," Cole rasped, his voice rough with sleep and memory. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, the worn floorboards cold beneath his feet. The nightmare receded, leaving behind its usual residue of sweat and sorrow. Cole was a man in his early 50s, with the lean but sturdy build of someone who had spent a lifetime in motion. His brown hair was cut short, military style, with distinguished silver creeping in at the temples. His face was etched with lines of hardship, but his eyes, when not clouded by the past, held a deep, quiet kindness. He ran a hand over Kodiak's broad head, the gesture a familiar ritual, just a bad dream. Their morning routine was a quiet, unspoken language. Cole moved around the small, 2-room cabin, the air smelling of damp wood and pine. He started the coffee maker, its gurgle one of the few sounds that broke the morning stillness. Outside, a persistent drizzle fell, turning the dense forest into a landscape of shimmering green and gray. While the coffee brewed, he fried a single egg and 2 strips of bacon, the meager contents of his refrigerator. He ate his egg and 1 strip of bacon, then tore the second strip into pieces, placing them in Kodiak's bowl. The dog ate with a gentle dignity, looking up at Cole afterward as if to say thank you. This bond, this silent understanding, was the one thing in Cole's life that felt whole and unbroken. The mail arrived mid-morning, brought by a rural carrier in a beat-up truck. Among the usual junk mail was a thick, cream-colored envelope with an embossed return address: Finch, Albright, and Associates, attorneys at law. Cole stared at it for a long moment. He didn't know any lawyers. He tore it open with a sense of foreboding. The letter was formal, informing him of the passing of his uncle, Arthur Vance, and requesting his presence for the reading of the will. Arthur Vance, a Vietnam veteran, a man as quiet and rugged as the Oregon mountains he had called home. Cole had only met him a handful of times as a child. He remembered a man with kind eyes and a firm handshake, but they were not close. Still, a sense of duty prompted him to go. The lawyer's office in Portland was a world away from his cabin. It was a place of polished wood, hushed tones, and air that smelled of money. Cole, dressed in his best pair of faded denim jeans and a clean navy flannel shirt over a gray t-shirt, felt immediately out of place. He kept Kodiak in the truck, promising to be back soon. Mr. Finch was a thin man in an expensive suit, his face a neutral professional mask. Also present was another man, younger, perhaps in his late 30s. He wore an impeccably tailored suit, a stark contrast to Cole's practical attire. His name, was Marcus Thorne, Arthur's grandnephew, and he carried an air of smug entitlement. His smile, when he glanced at Cole, was brief and predatory. The reading was short and to the point. Mr. Finch's voice droned on, listing assets, properties, and stock portfolios. The family estate in the Willamette Valley, the commercial properties in Portland, the considerable investment accounts, all went to Marcus Thorne. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, a look of immense satisfaction on his face. Then, Mr. Finch cleared his throat. "And to my nephew, Cole," he read, "a fellow soldier who understands that the greatest value is often found in the smallest of things, I leave $1. A suffocating silence filled the room. Cole felt a flush of heat rise up his neck. It wasn't anger, but a cold, familiar wave of humiliation. He had been dismissed his entire life by family, who saw him as little more than a misguided drifter who chose the army over a real career. This felt like one final, posthumous slight. Marcus let out a soft, condescending chuckle, quickly stifling it when Mr. Finch shot him a sharp look. Mr. Finch slid a single, crisp dollar bill across the polished table. Cole stared at it. He didn't move. "That is all," the lawyer said, his tone softening slightly. Cole stood up, his movements stiff. He took the dollar bill, folded it once, and put it in his pocket without a word. He gave a curt nod to Mr. Finch, ignored Marcus completely, and walked out of the office, his back straight, his face an unreadable mask. The drive back to the cabin was long and silent. The drizzle had turned into a steady, gray rain that matched his mood. When he finally pulled up to the small house, Kodiak was waiting, his tail giving a few hopeful thumps against the truck's passenger seat. Cole walked inside, the weight of his disappointment pressing down on him. He tossed his keys onto the small counter and took the dollar bill from his pocket. It felt like a joke, a cruel punchline to a life that had already dealt him more than his share of blows. With a sigh of pure exhaustion, he threw the single dollar onto the scarred wooden kitchen table. It landed with a soft, insignificant flutter. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He didn't notice Kodiak pad softly into the room. The big shepherd approached the table, his movements cautious. He lowered his head, sniffing the dollar bill with intense curiosity. It smelled of strange hands, of a sterile office, but also faintly of the pine and old paper that clung to Cole. After a moment, Kodiak gently nudged the bill with his wet nose, pushing it a fraction of an inch closer to Cole's side of the table. It was a deliberate, inquisitive gesture, as if the dog sensed this piece of paper was more than it seemed. But Cole didn't see it. Lost in the fog of his own despair, he only felt the familiar, comforting weight of Kodiak's head settling on his knee. He reached down and absently stroked the dog's fur. "It's nothing, boy," he murmured, his voice thick with defeat. "Just nothing at all." 3 days passed in a haze of gray drizzle and quiet despair. The single dollar bill remained on the kitchen table, a silent testament to Cole's humiliation. He had tried to ignore it, to fall back into the rhythm of his solitary life. He spent time cleaning his old service rifle, the methodical process usually a comfort, but now it felt hollow. He worked on carving a piece of driftwood he had found by the river, but his hands felt clumsy, his focus gone. Kodiak stayed close, a constant, reassuring presence. He seemed to sense the shift in his human, the heavy blanket of sorrow that had settled over their small cabin. He would rest his head on Cole's lap for long periods, his amber eyes full of a wisdom that needed no words. On the fourth morning, the jarring ring of the telephone cut through the quiet. It was a sound so rare that both Cole and Kodiak started. Cole stared at the old landline phone on the wall, his first instinct to ignore it. No good news ever came from an unexpected call. It rang again, insistent. With a heavy sigh, he picked it up. "Hello? Mr. Cole?" The voice was crisp, professional, and familiar. It was the lawyer, Mr. Finch. I was hoping I might catch you. There's nothing else to discuss, Cole said, his tone flat. The will was read. Yes, it was, Mr. Finch replied, but his voice had changed. The detached professionalism was gone, replaced by a strange sense of urgency. But what was on the paper was merely a formality, a necessary legal step. Your uncle's true legacy, Mr. Cole, is not found in a document. Cole was silent, his cynicism warring with a flicker of intrigue. I don't understand. I didn't expect you to. Not yet, the lawyer said. Arthur was a man who believed in tests. He believed character was revealed through action, not words. When you left my office, I gave you a second envelope along with your receipt. Do you still have it? Cole frowned, his eyes scanning the cluttered counter. He remembered a plain envelope, which he had shoved into his jacket pocket and forgotten about. He found it beneath a stack of mail. I have it. Good. Inside, you will find an address, nothing more. Your uncle's final request was that you go there, alone. Well, with your canine companion, of course. Arthur was very fond of dogs. Mr. Finch paused, and for the first time, Cole could hear a genuine plea in his voice. Please, Mr. Cole, just go, for his memory, if nothing else. Before Cole could protest, the line went dead. He stood holding the receiver, the dial tone buzzing in his ear. A game. It had to be some sort of cruel, elaborate game. He tore open the envelope. Just as the lawyer said, there was only a single sheet of paper with a set of coordinates and a handwritten address in a place called Sanctuary Creek. He tossed it onto the table next to the dollar. His first instinct was to burn them both. But as he looked around the small, bare cabin, at the leaking spot in the ceiling he kept meaning to fix, at the pantry that held little more than beans and rice, a different thought took hold. What did he have to lose? His pride was already wounded. His finances were already in shambles. There was nothing left here for him but the ghosts of his past. He looked at Kodiak, who was watching him intently, his head cocked to one side. The dog whined softly, as if he knew a decision was being made. What do you think, boy? Cole asked. Feel like a road trip? Kodiak's tail gave a powerful thump, thump, thump against the floor. That was all the answer Cole needed. A former soldier never travels unprepared. Within the hour, Cole had packed a duffel bag with a few changes of clothes, a first aid kit, and his camping gear. His movements were efficient, born of years of ingrained discipline. He checked the oil and tires on his old Ford F-150, a truck as battered and reliable as he was. He filled 2 canteens with water and made sure Kodiak's food and water bowl were secure in the passenger side footwell. Finally, he walked back to the table. He picked up the dollar bill, folded it neatly, and tucked it into the small pocket of his jeans. Then he took the paper with the address and placed it on the passenger seat. As they pulled away from the cabin, Kodiak sat proudly in the seat beside him, his nose pressed to the window, watching the familiar woods give way to the open road. Cole felt a strange lightness, a sense of forward motion he hadn't experienced in years. The future was a complete unknown, but for the first time in a long time, it felt better than the past. The journey took them deep into the heart of Oregon's mountain range. The 2-lane highway twisted and climbed, flanked by towering Douglas firs and ancient cedars. A low mist hung in the valleys, and the air grew cooler, cleaner. As the miles rolled by, Cole's mind drifted back to his uncle. He remembered a summer visit when he was 10 years old. Arthur had taken him to a river and shown him how to skip stones. He hadn't said much, but he had a patient way of showing Cole just how to hold the flat rock, how to flick his wrist. They spent an hour in comfortable silence, watching their stones dance across the water. He remembered the smell of Arthur's workshop, a rich scent of sawdust, oil, and coffee. His uncle was always building something, His hands strong and capable, he had a quiet intensity, a deep focus in his eyes that Cole would later recognize in the best soldiers he served with. Arthur Vance was a man who understood purpose. Could such a man have left him a single dollar as an insult? It didn't seem to fit the person he remembered. The man who taught him to skip stones, who nodded with quiet approval when Cole announced he was enlisting, seemed more complex than that. As he drove, the phrase from the will echoed in his mind. Who understands that the greatest value is often found in the smallest of things. Maybe it wasn't a joke. Maybe, just like the lawyer said, it was a test. Cole glanced at the folded dollar bill, now tucked into the truck's ashtray. A deep curiosity, an emotion he hadn't felt in years, began to burn away the edges of his resentment. For the first time since the will reading, he felt a flicker of something that was almost hope. The address on the paper led them off the main highway and onto a winding gravel road that was little more than a notch carved into the mountainside. The forest pressed in on both sides, a dense wall of green and shadow. Cole's old truck rumbled along, the only sound in a world that seemed to have gone silent. After another 20 minutes, the road ended abruptly at a formidable gate made of black wrought iron. Arched across the top, in simple, elegant letters, was the name, Sanctuary Creek. Cole put the truck in park and got out. Kodiak immediately alerted his side. The gate was solid and clearly locked. There was no intercom, no keypad, no sign of life. To his left, set into a thick wooden post, was a small, circular indentation in a metal plate, about the size of a silver dollar. It looked weathered, as if it had been there for a very long time. He felt a surge of frustration. Had he driven all this way for a dead end? Another of his uncle's cryptic jokes? He ran a hand over the cold iron bars, searching for any kind of latch or button. Nothing. Kodiak whined, a low, impatient sound. He walked to the wooden post and nudged the circular slot with his nose, then looked back at Cole, his tail giving a single, expectant wag. Cole stared at the slot, and then the memory of Kodiak nudging the dollar bill on his kitchen table flashed through his mind. The lawyer's words echoed, "The greatest value is often found in the smallest of things." It couldn't be. He reached into his jeans pocket, his fingers closing around the folded dollar. It was a bill, not a coin. How could it possibly work? Still, he had come this far. He unfolded the bill and then began to fold it again, carefully, tightly, rolling it into a dense, compact circle. It took some effort, but he managed to roll it into a cylinder that was roughly the size of the slot. With a deep breath, he pushed the rolled-up bill into the indentation. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft, satisfying click, the mechanism engaged. Silently, smoothly, the heavy iron gate swung inward, revealing the road beyond. Cole stood frozen for a second, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was the first genuine smile he had felt in days. "Well, I'll be," he whispered. He got back in the truck and drove through the gates, which swung shut behind him with the same quiet finality. The dense forest immediately gave way to a wide, breathtaking valley he never knew existed. It was a place of impossible peace. A clear, sparkling creek meandered through lush green meadows. Small, beautifully crafted log cabins were scattered across the landscape, each with a curl of smoke rising from its stone chimney. There were large vegetable gardens, a small orchard, and the sound of birdsong instead of highway traffic. As he drove slowly down the main path, people began to emerge from the cabins. They were men and women of various ages, but they all had a familiar look in their eyes. The quiet watchfulness, the steady posture of soldiers. They didn't crowd him, but watched with a calm curiosity, their expressions open and welcoming. He parked the truck in a designated area near a larger, central building that looked like a community hall. As he and Kodiak got out, an older man with a neatly trimmed white beard and the calm presence of a natural leader approached him. "Cole?" the man asked, his voice warm. "I'm Sam. We've been expecting you." Cole was taken aback. "You have? Arthur told us you'd come eventually," Sam said with a knowing smile. "He had a lot of faith in you. He left this for you to read when you arrived." He handed Cole a thick, sealed envelope made of heavy parchment. On the front, in his uncle's familiar, strong handwriting, was his name. Sam gestured to a small, empty cabin on the edge of the creek. "That one's for you. Get settled. Read your letter. We'll be here when you're ready." Cole nodded, still trying to process everything. He walked to the cabin, the fresh mountain air filling his lungs. It was simple inside, with a bed, a small kitchen, and a stone fireplace. It was clean, solid, and welcoming. He sat on the porch swing, Kodiak lying faithfully at his feet, and opened the letter. "My dear Cole, if you are reading this, then you have passed the first test. You have proven you have patience, curiosity, and that you are not so broken that you have given up entirely. I apologize for the theatrics, but they were necessary. Sanctuary Creek is not an inheritance of money. It is an inheritance of purpose. I built this place for soldiers like us, for the ones who came home from the fight, but never truly left the battlefield. It is a place to find quiet, to heal the wounds that no one else can see, and to remember the person you were before the uniform. The dollar was the key, but it was also a symbol. I needed a guardian for this place, someone who would not see its value in timber or mineral rights, as others surely will. I needed someone who would see the value in a single, seemingly worthless dollar, someone who would understand that its true worth was the door it could open. Marcus sees only profit. He would sell this land and scatter this community to the winds without a second thought. You, I hope, see something different. This place is now your responsibility, your mission, should you choose to accept it. Be its guardian. Protect its people. The community will provide for all your needs. Your only job is to lead them, to keep this sanctuary safe. This is my true legacy, and now it is yours. With faith, your uncle, Arthur Vance. Cole read the letter twice, his vision blurring. The weight that had crushed his spirit for years began to lift. The humiliation from the lawyer's office, the sting of the single dollar, it all vanished, replaced by a profound, heart-achingly clear sense of understanding. It was never an insult. It was an honor. He looked up from the letter, his eyes scanning the peaceful valley. He saw two men working together in a garden. He saw a woman sitting by the creek, sketching in a notebook. He saw a community of survivors, of soldiers who had found their peace, a purpose, a mission. These were words he hadn't allowed himself to think about for a very long time. He ran a hand over Kodiak's head, and the dog looked up at him, its tail thumping a steady rhythm against the wooden porch. "Looks like we're home, boy," Cole whispered, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. "Looks like we're finally home." The next few weeks passed like a slow, healing balm on a long-neglected wound. For the first time since he had taken off the uniform, Cole felt the gnawing emptiness inside him begin to recede. He fell into the rhythm of Sanctuary Creek, a life dictated by the sun and the seasons, not by a clock. The nightmares still came, but they were less frequent, their sharp edges softened by days filled with tangible purpose. He discovered that the skills he had learned in the service were not just for survival, but for building. When a late spring storm tore shingles from the roof of the community hall, it was Cole who led a small team, his movements confident and sure as he navigated the slick roof, his voice calm and clear as he gave instructions. He spent long, quiet afternoons with Sam in the sprawling vegetable gardens, the two men working side by side, their shared understanding requiring few words. The earth was honest, Sam had told him. You give to it, and it gives back. There were no hidden motives. Cole's leadership was quiet and unassuming. He never gave orders, but when a massive fir tree fell across the main access road after a night of heavy wind, the other residents naturally looked to him. He organized a work crew, his assessment of the problem swift, and his plan efficient. By lunchtime, the road was clear. In the evenings, they would often gather around a communal fire pit. Cole mostly listened as the others shared stories, their voices a low murmur under the vast starry sky. He was part of something again, a unit, a family forged not in the crucible of combat, but in the shared pursuit of peace. Kodiak thrived. He was the unofficial mascot of the creek, spending his days exploring the meadows, swimming in the cool water, and greeting every resident with a friendly wag of his tail. He seemed to sense the change in Cole, the lessening of the tension he had carried for so long. The dog's spirit was lighter, more playful. The peace was shattered on a bright Tuesday morning. The distant sound of a high-performance engine, completely alien in their world of practical trucks and quiet electric carts, grew steadily louder. A sleek, black luxury sedan, its paint job gleaming, pulled up in front of the community hall, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. Marcus Thorne stepped out of the car. He had traded his business suit for expensive casual wear, but he looked just as out of place. He surveyed the quiet community with a look of thinly veiled disdain, as if observing an uninteresting zoo exhibit. Cole had been talking with Sam on the hall's porch. He straightened up, his posture shifting into something more guarded. Kodiak, who had been dozing in a patch of sun at Cole's feet, lifted his head, a low rumble starting deep in his chest. "Well, well," Marcus said, his voice slick and condescending as he approached the porch. "Uncle Arthur's little charity project. Quaint. What do you want, Marcus?" Cole's voice was even, betraying no emotion. "I've come to make you an offer, a very generous one," Marcus announced, loud enough for a few other residents who had stopped their work to hear. "I had my geologists run some surveys. This entire valley is sitting on a significant deposit of lithium, incredibly valuable. I'm prepared to offer $10 million for the entire property. Cash." He smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Think of it. That's enough for every person here to get a fresh start, buy a real house in a real town. You could all live comfortably for the rest of your lives." As Marcus spoke, Kodiak rose to his feet. He didn't bark. He didn't snap. He simply stood between Cole and the visitor, his body rigid. The fur along his spine bristled slightly. The low growl in his chest was a constant, menacing vibration. His amber eyes were fixed on Marcus, unblinking and filled with an unnerving intelligence. It was a clear, unmistakable message. "You are a threat." Marcus scoffed. "Can you control your dog?" "He's under perfect control," Cole replied calmly, his hand resting lightly on Kodiak's head. The dog's unwavering distrust solidified what Cole already felt in his gut. "The answer is no." Marcus's smile faltered. "No? I just offered you life-changing money. Don't be a fool. This place is not for sale," Cole said, his voice gaining strength. He was no longer just speaking for himself. He was the guardian of this sanctuary. "My uncle didn't build this place to be strip-mined. He built it to heal people. Its value is not something you can measure in dollars." The slick facade of civility dropped from Marcus's face, replaced by a flash of raw anger. "You're a sentimental old man sitting on a gold mine you're too stupid to dig. This place is a dead end for a bunch of has-beens. I'm offering you a way out." "We're not looking for a way out," Sam interjected, his voice firm as he stepped forward to stand beside Cole. "We're already home." Marcus's eyes narrowed into slits. He pointed a finger at Cole. "You're making a huge mistake. I will get this land, one way or another. You will regret this day." "It is Chark." He turned on his heel, stomped back to his car, and sped away, leaving the scent of exhaust and resentment hanging in the clean mountain air. A heavy silence settled over the small group of onlookers, The first threat had been made. The outside world they had all sought to escape had found them. Cole looked down at Kodiak, who was still tense, watching the road where the car had disappeared. He stroked the dog's powerful neck until the growl subsided. "Good boy," he murmured, his voice low. "I heard you." He knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was only the beginning. Marcus's threat left an invisible stain on the tranquility of Sanctuary Creek. The air, once filled with a sense of absolute safety, now held a faint, sharp edge of tension. The residents went about their days as before, tending to the gardens and maintaining the workshops. But there was a new watchfulness in their eyes. They were soldiers, after all. They knew the difference between peace and the quiet before a storm. Cole's old instincts, long dormant, had fully reawakened. He began each day before dawn, making a wide patrol of the property's perimeter, with Kodiak at his side. The dog seemed to understand the shift in purpose. Their morning walks were no longer just for exercise. They were for reconnaissance. Their patrol route always included the small hydroelectric dam at the north end of the valley. It was the heart of the community, a testament to Arthur's ingenuity. Built from reinforced earth and local stone, it harnessed the power of the creek to provide clean, reliable energy for every cabin. It was their source of independence, a symbol of their self-sufficiency. Cole knew that if Marcus intended to cause trouble, the dam was the most logical target. One overcast morning, as they approached the structure, the air was heavy with the promise of rain. The roar of water rushing through the spillway was a constant, powerful hum. Kodiak, who was trotting a few feet ahead, suddenly stopped dead. His entire body went rigid, his head low and his ears flattened. The fur on his back and powerful shoulders bristled. He stared intently at a thick cluster of ferns and bushes just off the path near the dam's control housing. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound of deep, serious warning. Then, he erupted in a series of sharp, aggressive barks. It was not the excited bark he used for a squirrel or a deer. This was a territorial, threatening sound aimed at an unseen enemy. "What is it, boy?" Cole said softly, his hand moving instinctively to the large knife he wore on his belt. "What do you see?" He trusted his dog without question. While a man could be fooled, a dog's senses were honest. He approached the spot Kodiak was focused on, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement. He saw nothing. But Kodiak did not relent. He continued to bark, refusing to break his stare. Okay, I see," Cole soothed him. "Stand down." With a final, low growl, Kodiak fell silent, but remained tense, positioning himself between Cole and the bushes. Cole carefully pushed aside the broad, wet leaves of the ferns. The ground beneath was soft and damp. And there, pressed into the dark earth, was a partial boot print. The tread was deep and aggressive, a pattern he didn't recognize from any of the residents' work boots. It was the print of a heavy, tactical-style boot. As he knelt for a closer look, he caught another scent on the air, carried by the damp breeze. It was faint, almost unnoticeable, but it was completely out of place in the forest. It was a sharp, chemical odor, like some kind of industrial solvent or grease. It made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He searched the entire area for another 20 minutes, but found nothing else. The boot print and the lingering, unnatural smell were the only clues. Over the next few days, Kodiak's behavior confirmed Cole's growing suspicion. Every time they neared the dam, the dog would become agitated. He would whine softly, his tail low, and stay close to Cole's leg, constantly scanning the surrounding woods. He refused to drink from the creek downstream from the structure, something he had always done before. The dog knew something was wrong. His anxiety was a constant, living alarm bell that only Cole could hear. That evening, Cole brought his concerns to Sam and a few of the other senior residents. They gathered in the community hall, the warmth of the fire, a stark contrast to the cold topic of conversation. "I found a boot print near the dam control house," Cole explained, his voice low and steady. "The tread wasn't from anyone here. Kodiak has been on edge ever since. He also smelled something, a chemical of some kind." Sam listened patiently, stroking his white beard. "Could have been a hiker who lost their way, Cole. We get them wandering off the main trails sometimes." "Or poachers," added another resident, a woman named Maria, who had served as a mechanic in the Air Force. "They use all sorts of chemicals for lures and scents." "The boot was heavy, like a tactical boot," Cole countered. "And Kodiak's reaction wasn't just curiosity. It was a threat warning. He hasn't been right about that area since." The others exchanged glances. Cole could see the reluctance in their eyes. They had come to Sanctuary Creek to escape this kind of paranoia, to leave behind the world of constant threat assessment. They wanted to believe in the peace of the valley, to believe that Marcus's words were just the empty threats of a frustrated businessman. "We'll keep an eye out," Sam said, his tone meant to be reassuring. "Maybe we can set up a few trail cameras. It's probably just a cougar making him nervous." They've been more active this season. Cole knew they were wrong. He knew the difference between an animal threat and a human one. He had spent a lifetime learning it, but he also knew he couldn't force them to see what they weren't ready to see. He had their respect, but he had not yet earned their absolute trust in his instincts. He nodded, not wanting to push the issue further. A few cameras would be a good start. As he walked back to his cabin later that night, Kodiak stayed close, his body pressed against Cole's leg. The night was quiet, but it no longer felt peaceful. It felt charged, heavy with unspoken danger. Cole stopped and looked toward the north end of the valley, where the silhouette of the dam stood against the darkening sky. He trusted his dog's senses more than he trusted men's hope. And every instinct Kodiak possessed was screaming that their sanctuary was about to be violated. The storm arrived without subtlety. It rolled in from the west, a bruised purple and black mass that swallowed the afternoon sun and plunged the valley into a premature twilight. The wind came first, a low moan through the pines that quickly escalated into a violent howl. Then came the rain. It was not the gentle drizzle Oregon was known for. It was a torrential, blinding downpour that hammered the cabin roofs and turned the soft earth to mud. The residents of Sanctuary Creek, accustomed to the region's weather, secured their homes. But as the hours wore on, a collective unease began to grow. The creek, normally a peaceful, babbling waterway, had transformed into a raging, muddy torrent. Its roar was a constant, angry presence that vibrated through the floorboards. Cole felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This was the moment he had been dreading. "Stay here, boy," he said to Kodiak, grabbing a heavy, waterproof jacket. But Kodiak would not be left behind. He stood by the door, his body tense, a low whine escaping his throat. Cole relented. "All right, with me." They battled their way through the driving rain toward the dam. The wind tore at them, and the path was slick and treacherous. When they reached the small control shed, Cole saw with a jolt of alarm that the water level in the reservoir was dangerously high, already lapping at the top edge of the earthen wall. The gauges inside the shed were all in the red zone. The spillway gates, which should have opened automatically to relieve the pressure, were shut tight. He grabbed the large iron lever for the manual release. He put his entire weight into it, his muscles straining. It didn't budge. He tried again, grunting with effort. The lever was completely seized, as if it were welded in place. This was no mechanical failure. This was deliberate. The faint chemical smell he had detected days ago seemed to hang in the air, a ghostly confirmation of his fears. At that moment, a section of the creek bank upstream gave way. A churning wave of brown water surged into the reservoir. Cole watched in horror as a sheet of water crested the top of the dam, transforming from a leak into a waterfall. There was no more time. His training took over, his mind going cold and clear. He sprinted toward the community hall, Kodiak easily keeping pace. He burst through the door, where several residents had gathered, their faces pale with worry. "The dam is overflowing!" Cole's voice cut through the roar of the storm, a commander's voice that demanded immediate attention. "This is an emergency evacuation. Everyone to the eastern ridge. Now, grab your go-bags and move." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then the veterans reacted. There was no panic, only the swift, efficient movement of people trained for crisis. Cole ran to the old hand-cranked air raid siren, mounted on the hall's roof, and began to turn it. A mournful, rising wail filled the valley, a desperate call to arms against the fury of the water. As people began moving up the muddy slopes to the designated high ground, Sam ran to Cole, shouting over the wind, "Everyone's moving! I've done a quick head count." "Is anyone missing?" Cole yelled back. Sam's face was grim. "Ben and his family. Their cabin is the lowest one in the valley, right by the old willow." Cole's heart sank. Ben was a young Marine veteran who had lost part of his leg in an IED blast. He lived with his wife, Sarah, and their 6-year-old daughter, Lily. They wouldn't be able to move as fast as the others. "Get everyone else to safety, Sam," Cole ordered. "Keep them accounted for. I'm going for them." He didn't wait for a reply. He plunged back down the slope, Kodiak at his heels. The water was already a churning, knee-deep river across the valley floor. The current was deceptively strong, pulling at his legs and threatening his balance. Debris, branches, and loose lumber swirled in the torrent. Kodiak was magnificent. The powerful dog moved through the water with a purpose and stability Cole lacked. He stayed just ahead, his body acting as a living breakwater, his sharp barks warning Cole of unseen dangers. Twice, the dog nudged him hard to the left, and Cole realized he had been about to step into a deep, washed-out section of the path. They reached Ben's cabin just as the main force of the floodwater hit it. The small log home groaned under the impact. Water was pouring through the windows. Cole kicked the door open. Inside, the water was already waist-deep. Ben was trying to get a small, waterproof case of medical supplies while Sarah held a terrified Lily in her arms on top of a table. "We have to go now," Cole shouted. "Leave it, Ben." He waded to the table. "Sarah, give me Lily," the little girl cried, but wrapped her arms tightly around his neck. Cole settled her on his back. "Ben, I need you on my arm. Don't fight the current. Move with it. Kodiak will lead. Follow the dog." Their journey back was a nightmare. The water was a living beast, trying to drag them down. Cole focused on each step, his legs burning with the effort of fighting the current while carrying the child. Ben leaned heavily on him, his prosthetic leg a hindrance in the churning flood. Through it all, Kodiak was their guide. The dog swam ahead, finding the safest, shallowest route, his barks cutting through the storm to guide them. He was their beacon in the chaos. Finally, after an eternity, they felt the ground begin to slope upward. They stumbled out of the main current, muddy, soaked, and exhausted, onto the path leading up the ridge. Other residents rushed down to help them the rest of the way. Cole collapsed to his knees at the top, gently lowering a sobbing Lily into her mother's arms. He watched as Ben was helped to a dry spot, his face a mask of gratitude. Cole's body ached, and his lungs burned. He looked down at the valley. His sanctuary, their home, was being torn apart by a brown, churning sea. Kodiak came to his side, shaking a spray of muddy water from his coat before licking Cole's face. Cole wrapped his arms around the big dog's neck, burying his face in his wet fur. They were safe. But the battle was far from over. His enemy had declared war, and Cole, with the heart of a soldier, was ready to fight back. Dawn broke over a landscape of devastation. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky of bruised clouds and a valley scarred by the river's fury. The lower meadows were a wasteland of thick, brown mud and tangled debris. Several of the smaller cabins had been shifted from their foundations, their porches torn away. The carefully tended gardens were completely gone, washed away by the torrent. Yet, as the sun's first weak rays touched the ridge, the spirit of Sanctuary Creek was anything but broken. The community, forged in the discipline of military service, was already at work. There was no wailing or despair. There was only the quiet, determined grit of survivors. Sam was organizing work crews to assess the structural integrity of each building. Maria, the former Air Force mechanic, was already working on the backup generator. Even Ben, whose family Cole had rescued, was out with the others, his limp more pronounced, but his resolve firm as he helped clear a path. Marcus Thorne had meant to shatter their community. He had failed. The flood, intended as a killing blow, had instead acted as a crucible, burning away any remaining individualism and forging them into a single, unbreakable unit. Cole moved among them, his presence a source of quiet strength. He was their commander now, not by appointment, but by action. The respect they had given him before had deepened into a profound battlefield trust. His first priority, after ensuring everyone was safe and accounted for, was the dam. The source of their disaster was also the key to their fight. "Sam, keep the crews working on the cabins," he said, his voice carrying easily in the still morning air. "I'm taking Kodiak to inspect the spillway mechanism. I want to see exactly what they did." He and Kodiak made their way through the muck to the dam. The water had receded, leaving behind a thick layer of silt and a jumble of debris washed up against the concrete base of the control shed. The iron lever he had tried to move was visibly bent, and a thick metal bar, not part of the original design, had been wedged into the mechanism. It was crude, but effective. While Cole examined the sabotage, Kodiak began to behave strangely. He was not sniffing idly. His nose was twitching, and he moved with a frantic energy around a large pile of driftwood and refused that the flood had slammed against the shed's foundation. Suddenly, he stopped. He began to dig, his powerful front paws sending mud and wet leaves flying. "Kodiak, easy boy," Cole said, distracted by the jammed lever. But the dog ignored him. He dug with a desperate intensity, whining with effort. Cole frowned. This was the same intensity Kodiak had shown just before the storm. "Trust the dog." He set down his tools and went to the spot. "What have you got, boy?" "What is it?" He began pulling away the larger pieces of driftwood, revealing the layers of mud and silt beneath. Kodiak continued to dig at a specific spot. Cole's fingers sank into the cold, wet earth. He felt something hard and rectangular. He pulled it out. It was a small black plastic box, partially melted and scorched, an electronic timer. Wires protruded from one end, snapped and useless. This was the trigger. He showed it to Kodiak. "Good boy. Good find." Encouraged, the dog went back to digging, his nose buried in the mud. A moment later, he pulled back, a sodden, heavy object in his mouth. He dropped it at Cole's feet. It was a thick, leather-work glove, caked in mud and smelling of the same solvent Cole had noticed before. It was the kind of glove a construction worker or a mechanic would wear. Cole stood up, holding the two items in his hands, the scorched timer, the muddy glove. This was it. This was the tangible proof that turned his suspicions into undeniable fact. His community had not been the victim of a natural disaster. They had been the target of a deliberate, calculated attack. He took the evidence back to the community hall and laid it on a clean table for everyone to see. A cold, hard anger settled over the residents as they looked at the items. Their skepticism from the days before was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. The desire for peace was now overshadowed by a thirst for justice. "This proves it," Maria said, her voice tight with fury. "That monster tried to kill us." "It proves it to us," Cole said, his voice bringing a somber reality to the room. He looked at the faces around him, faces of good soldiers who believed in right and wrong. "But a rich man's lawyer will tear this apart in court. They'll say it could have washed down from miles upstream. They'll say the glove could belong to anyone. It's our word against a millionaire's." He let the heavy truth of his words sink in. He could see the understanding dawn on their faces. Marcus Thorne would not be defeated so easily. He would lie, he would cheat, and he would use his money and influence to bury them. "This is a start," Cole continued, his gaze sweeping over his new family. "But it's not enough. Marcus won't stop. Now that he's failed, he'll only escalate. We are in a fight, and we need more ammunition." "It's knowing," say the Brett Markenden. He looked down at Kodiak, who sat proudly beside the table, as if guarding his discovery. The dog had found the first clues, had warned them of the first danger. Now, they had to find the rest. The real fight, Cole knew, had just begun. The days that followed the flood were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The residents of Sanctuary Creek worked from sunrise to sunset, their movements fueled by a mixture of grit and cold, simmering anger. They cleared mud, salvaged what they could, and began the arduous process of rebuilding. But an unspoken question hung in the air. What now? They had a melted timer and a muddy glove. It was proof enough for them, but Cole knew it was a pebble to throw against the fortress of Marcus Thorne's wealth and influence. He felt the pressure mounting, the weight of his guardianship heavier than ever. He needed more, he just didn't know where to find it. Seeking a connection to his uncle, a spark of the man's quiet wisdom, Cole decided to clear out and repair Arthur's old workshop. The building, set on slightly higher ground, had been spared the worst of the flood, but a layer of muddy water had seeped in, leaving the floor coated in silt. The air was thick with the familiar, comforting scents of cedar sawdust, machine oil, and old coffee. It felt like a sacred space, a monument to a life of quiet competence. Kodiak followed him inside, his claws clicking on the concrete floor before he settled in a dry corner to watch. For hours, Cole worked in silence, sweeping out the mud, wiping down tools, and stacking lumber. He was lost in the rhythm of the work, his mind turning over their desperate situation. It was Kodiak who broke the spell. The dog, who had been resting peacefully, suddenly got up and walked to the far corner of the workshop. He began to sniff at the wooden floorboards, his tail low and stiff. A soft whine escaped his throat. Then he began to scratch, his claws making a frantic, scraping sound against the wood. "Kodiak, knock it off," Cole said, not looking up from the workbench he was cleaning. The scratching stopped for a moment, then started again, more insistent this time. It was followed by a single, sharp bark. It was not a warning bark, like at the dam, but a bark of summons, an urgent demand for attention. Cole sighed and turned around. Kodiak was staring at him, then back at the floor, scratching again with a single paw. "What is your deal, boy?" Cole walked over. He saw nothing out of the ordinary, just old, dusty floorboards. But Kodiak was relentless. He whined again, nudging Cole's hand with his nose and then pushing his nose back to the floor. Cole knelt down, running his hand over the boards. That's when he noticed it. In the dim light, one section of planking seemed just slightly different. The wood grain ran in a slightly different direction, and the seams were cut with a precision that was just a fraction off from the surrounding boards. It was a patch, a masterful one that an ordinary person would never notice. "All right, you have my attention," Cole murmured. He trusted the dog. Kodiak had proven his instincts were sharper than any man's. He went to the tool wall and returned with a sturdy crowbar. He wedged the tip into a thin seam and pried. The board creaked and groaned, then lifted up. Beneath it was not the dirt foundation he expected, but a solid, square trapdoor made of heavy timber, flush with the joists. And set into the center of the door was a familiar sight, a metal plate with a circular, dollar-sized indentation. A slow, disbelieving laugh escaped Cole's lips. "Arthur, you magnificent old fox." His uncle had not left one secret, but layers of them. Cole reached into his pocket for the dollar bill, the piece of paper that had started this whole journey. It felt less like currency now, and more like a sacred key. He carefully rolled it into a tight cylinder and inserted it into the lock. The same soft, satisfying click echoed in the quiet workshop. He found a recessed handle and pulled. The heavy door lifted, revealing a set of steep stone steps leading down into darkness. A cool, dry air that smelled of old paper and earth wafted up. He grabbed a flashlight and descended, Kodiak waiting obediently at the top. The cellar was small and stone-lined, a hidden chamber that felt ancient and completely secure. In the center, resting on a simple stone pedestal, was a heavy steel strongbox. His heart pounded in his chest. He carried the box up into the light of the workshop. It was secured with a simple but strong padlock. Using a set of bolt cutters, he snapped the lock. With trembling hands, he lifted the heavy lid. The contents were a warrior's arsenal, not of guns, but of paper and truth. On top was a thick, leather-bound portfolio. Inside were the original yellowed deeds to the entire valley, including all subsurface and mineral rights, dated 1948. They superseded any modern claim Marcus could possibly make. Beneath that were several meticulously organized files. They were filled with documents, photographs, and handwritten notes. It was decades of research on Marcus Thorne's company, detailing illegal waste dumping, safety violations, and financial crimes, complete with sworn affidavits from former employees. Arthur had been building a case against him for years, and at the very bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, were bundles of United States Treasury bonds, issued during World War II. They were old and faded, but Cole knew enough to recognize their immense value. It was a fortune, a war chest left to fund the very fight they now found themselves in. Cole sank back on his heels, the weight of the discovery washing over him. This was the final piece of the puzzle. His uncle hadn't just left him a sanctuary. He had left him a fortress, fully armed and provisioned for a siege. He had foreseen this conflict, had known that a man like Marcus would one day come for his peaceful valley, and he had spent years preparing the weapons his successor would need to defend it. He looked up at Kodiak, who was watching him from the top of the cellar stairs, his head cocked. The dog had not just found a box. He had unearthed their salvation. Cole felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. "Kodiak," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You did it, boy. You found the ammunition. The hunt was over. Now, the war could truly begin." The workshop, which had been a place of quiet contemplation, now felt like a command center. Cole laid the contents of the steel box out on his uncle's sturdy workbench. The yellowed deeds, the meticulous files of evidence, the heavy bundles of treasury bonds. This was not just a collection of old papers, it was an arsenal. He made the call to Mr. Finch from the community hall's satellite phone, his voice no longer that of a defeated man, but of a general preparing for an offensive. "Mr. Finch," he said, his tone even and firm, "you told me my uncle's true legacy wasn't on paper. You were only partially right. I need you to come to Sanctuary Creek, immediately. What I have to show you will change everything." There was a moment of silence on the other end, and then the lawyer, sensing the gravity in Cole's voice, simply said, "I'll be there tomorrow." When Mr. Finch arrived, his expensive city shoes looking absurd on the muddy path, he was a man transformed. Cole led him to the workshop. The lawyer, who had been the picture of professional detachment in his office, stared at the evidence laid out on the workbench, his mouth slightly agape. He picked up the 1,948 mineral rights deed, his fingers tracing the old signature as if it were a holy relic. He leafed through the files, documenting Marcus's crimes, his eyes widening with each page. "My God," he whispered, looking at Cole with a newfound, profound respect. Arthur was not just a client. He was a master strategist. This is airtight. The deeds alone invalidate every claim Marcus has. The rest of this," he gestured to the files on corporate malfeasance, "is enough to put him in prison for a very long time." Then Cole showed him the bonds. Mr. Finch, who understood the world of finance, let out a low whistle. "Cole, do you have any idea what these are worth today? We are not just on the defensive anymore. With these resources, we can hire the best environmental litigators in the country. We can fund our own geological surveys. We can launch a legal assault that Marcus Thorne will never see coming." And so, the final battle began. It was not fought with guns in the valley, but with documents and depositions in courtrooms and boardrooms. From Sanctuary Creek, Cole provided the ammunition. From his office in Portland, Mr. Finch fired the shots. They filed an emergency injunction, presenting the original deeds to a state judge. All of Marcus's prospecting permits were immediately suspended. Next, they presented the evidence of the sabotage, including the timer, the glove, and sworn testimony from Cole and other residents, to the county sheriff and the state police. A criminal investigation was officially launched. The most devastating blow came when Mr. Finch delivered the files on Marcus's corporate crimes to the Environmental Protection Agency and the state's Attorney General. Arthur's meticulous records, detailing decades of illegal dumping and environmental shortcuts, were undeniable. Whistleblower affidavits, long buried, were now in the hands of federal investigators. The story was too compelling to stay quiet. An anonymous tip, likely from Mr. Finch's office, found its way to a major newspaper. The headline was devastating: "Greedy tycoon accused of sabotaging veteran sanctuary for profit." The article detailed the story of a peaceful community of war heroes, a hidden valley of healing, and the ruthless corporation that tried to destroy them. Public sentiment turned against Marcus with ferocious speed. His company's stock plummeted. His carefully crafted image as a philanthropic business leader was shattered overnight. Cornered, facing criminal charges and financial ruin, Marcus finally broke. A team of his lawyers contacted Mr. Finch, offering a settlement. Cole's response, delivered via Finch, was simple and absolute. There would be no settlement. They would not take a single dollar of Marcus's money. They wanted only one thing: for him to publicly and permanently renounce all claims to the land and the resources beneath it, and to face the justice he deserved. Beaten, with investigators closing in and his corporate empire crumbling, Marcus had no choice. The news came on a cool, clear evening, a month after the battle had begun. Cole was sitting on his porch, watching the sun set behind the western ridge, Kodiak's head resting on his boot. The satellite phone rang. It was Mr. Finch. "It's over, Cole," the lawyer said, his voice filled with a triumphant exhaustion. "He signed everything? The state has officially recognized the 1,948 deeds and ratified the creation of the Sanctuary Creek Protective Trust. This land is safe forever. The Attorney General is pressing forward with multiple criminal charges. He's finished." Cole closed his eyes, a profound sense of relief washing over him. "Thank you, Mr. Finch, for everything." "No, Cole," the lawyer replied softly. "Thank you, and thank your uncle." That night the community gathered around the fire pit. The mood was not one of loud, boisterous celebration. It was something deeper. It was the quiet, profound satisfaction of a hard-won victory. They shared stories, not of the wars they had fought overseas, but of the one they had just won together, here, in their home. They had faced a powerful enemy, and had not bent, had not broken. Later, after the others had drifted back to their cabins, Cole stood alone by the creek, Kodiak at his side. The water, once a furious enemy, was now a gentle, murmuring friend. He looked up at the vast, peaceful sky, the stars bright and clear. The long war he had carried inside him for so many years finally felt like it was over. He had defended his post. He had protected his people. He had fulfilled his mission. He knelt and wrapped his arms around his dog, the animal who had started it all with a simple nudge of a worthless dollar. "We did it, boy," he whispered into Kodiak's thick fur. "It's over. We're safe." A year passed. The scars the flood had carved into the valley began to heal, covered over by the determined resilience of both nature and man. Sanctuary Creek was not just rebuilt, it was reborn, stronger and more beautiful than before. The cabins that had been damaged were reconstructed on higher, safer ground, their new foundations set deep in the earth. The gardens were twice as large, bursting with life. The dam stood as a quiet sentinel, repaired, reinforced, and a symbol of their victory. The most profound change, however, was in Cole. The haunted, solitary man who had arrived with all his worldly possessions in a single duffel bag was gone. In his place stood a leader. The lines on his face remained, but they were softened now by frequent smiles. The guarded look in his eyes had been replaced by a calm, steady warmth. He was no longer a soldier, adrift in a world he didn't understand. He was the guardian of this community, a brother, a mentor, and the heart of a large, unconventional family. He knew every resident by name, knew their stories, and understood their silent struggles. He worked alongside them, his hands calloused from gardening and carpentry, not from holding a weapon. The nightmares had faded, replaced by the deep, dreamless sleep of a man with a purpose. He had found more than a sanctuary. He had found a home. One bright summer morning, he gathered the community in the newly expanded hall. Mr. Finch was there, having made the journey from Portland. He stood beside Cole, no longer just a lawyer, but a trusted friend and advisor to the Creek. Cole looked at the faces before him, the men and women who had fought beside him. "What Arthur left us," he began, his voice filled with a quiet strength, "was more than just land. It was a mission. And I don't believe he intended for that mission to end here, at the edge of this valley." He unrolled a large map of the United States on the table. "With the resources Arthur provided, we have the chance to do more, to honor his legacy in a way that can change thousands of lives." He outlined his vision, the Arthur Vance Foundation. It would be a nonprofit organization with a single powerful mission: to create more sanctuary creeks across the country. They would buy land, fund construction, and use their own community as the model, a place to train new leaders to help other veterans find their way home. "This place," Cole said, his gaze sweeping the room, "will be the heart. We will be the ones to show them how. We survived the fight overseas, and we survived the fight here. Now it's our duty to help others do the same." The idea was met with a wave of unanimous, emotional approval. It gave their personal victory a greater meaning. Their struggle was no longer just about their own survival, but about the survival and healing of countless others they had never met. Their quiet haven was about to become the headquarters for a nationwide mission of hope. The story ends, as it so often does, at sunset. Cole stood on the eastern ridge, the same high ground where they had taken refuge from the flood. The valley below was bathed in the warm, golden light of the fading day. He could see the lights twinkling on in the cabins, hear the distant, happy sound of children playing near the community hall. The scent of wood smoke and pine hung in the air. It was a picture of perfect, hard-won peace. Kodiak sat beside him, a solid, constant presence. His gray and white coat seemed to shimmer in the evening light. He leaned his heavy head against Cole's leg, his amber eyes also looking out over the valley they had saved together. Cole thought back to the man he had been, lost and adrift, his only companion, the dog at his side. He thought of the single, folded dollar bill, a seemingly cruel joke that had turned out to be the key to his entire world. He had come here seeking nothing, and in return, he had been given everything. A home, a family, a mission. His uncle had left him a legacy of purpose, a gift of immense faith. He had not only lived up to that faith, but he had expanded it, ready to pass it on to others. The soldier's long war was finally over. The guardian had found his post, and he would hold it for the rest of his days. He knelt, wrapping his arms around his loyal friend, the animal whose intelligence and unwavering belief in him had untied every knot on his impossible journey. He buried his face in Kodiak's thick fur, the familiar scent a comfort and a reminder of all they had been through. "Look what we did, boy," Cole whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Just look at what we did." It is a reclined bog snow, and two patients send. Together, the man and his dog watched the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the mountains, leaving their sanctuary safe and peaceful in the quiet dark. The incredible journey of Cole and Kodiak reminds us that sometimes the most profound guidance comes not from a map, but from the silent, unwavering loyalty of a faithful companion. They teach us that true wealth is found not in what we own, but in the love we share and the purpose we find in protecting one another. If this story of redemption and resilience touched your heart, we invite you to become part of our community by subscribing so you never miss a tale of hope. Your likes and shares help these stories find the people who need to hear them most, and we would love to read your own thoughts in the comments below. Our next story of an unbreakable bond is waiting for you now, right on the screen.